Alec Broadfoot leads VisionSpark, a consulting firm helping companies make critical people decisions that have a significant bottom line impact. For more than a decade, VisionSpark has helped hundreds of entrepreneurial companies hire key leaders with a 98% placement rate. His company has become a trusted and sought-after resource for business owners seeking to improve their hiring practices and hire the right leaders. Prior to VisionSpark, Alec served as president of a publishing company and the chief executive of a marketing fulfillment firm. The firm was recognized by Business First as one of the fastest 50 growing companies in Central Ohio, and also earned him a nomination for Ernst & Young's 2008 Entrepreneur of the Year Award. He lives in Ohio with his family. Alec, welcome to the next level.
Great to be here.
So, Alec, I would love to learn more about VisionSpark. You know, as entrepreneurs, we're told to hire A players in our businesses, and it sounds obvious, it sounds good. So maybe we just start by you telling us a little bit about VisionSpark, and I'd love to hear your perspective on why more businesses aren't successful in hiring A players.
Yeah, great question. So, to have someone that has your core values and that is a great performer is really hard to find. So that's what we are strong at. So our process is really thorough. We get to know the entrepreneur, the visionary, the culture of the company, and then we have a large candidate pool that we're able to vet to make sure that the person in the end that you hire is an A player. They perform super well. They get along with the team and they fit the culture, and they're aligned with the entrepreneur. So it's tough to hire A players because the numbers are against us. So Brad Smart, author Top Grading, he's actually the one that came up with the term A player, B player, etc. He did a study and he found that the average mishire cost an organization 278 hours of time. And from a money standpoint, a mishire can cost an organization up to 14 times their salary. And so, those numbers are against us. Gallup recently did a study, and they said companies fail to choose the right manager 82% of the time. So they're about an 18% success rate. If you throw companies in my industry into the mix, you think, well, recruiters and search firms, they got to be more successful. They are, but it's only about 60% placement rate and a 40% retention rate. So the numbers don't look good. It's really hard. It's hard to hire those A players. And so the only way to do that is to use great tools, evaluate culture, team fit, and making sure you're working with the right organizations that also value having the right people in the right seats.
Well, and that's, I think, the perfect jumping off point, because if less than 20% of people who are hired are A players who are retained, right? The odds are against you. The numbers are against you. Is it that reflects the population, that reflects the workforce, that only 20% of the workforce would be qualified as a player? Or is it that the businesses they get hired into also bear some of the responsibility and for whatever reason aren't set up to have A players be successful in their organization?
Yeah, it's really the latter. It's a big question. So a lot of companies, they fail to really take time to identify who they need, what success looks like. And so, I need a salesperson. Well, Joanne on the company softball team, she's a neighbor of mine. She actually is looking to be a salesperson. Hey, let's hire Joanne. And you don't really take time to determine, okay, what type of salesperson do our clients need? Who's going to fit in our organization? What success looks like? So, if you don't have a target, you miss every time, right? One of my favorite scriptures in the good book is an employer who hires a fool. Let me say it again. An employer who hires a fool is like an archer that shoots at random. And so we want to make sure we are very clear on who we hire, and we have a hiring process. One of my mentors, when I heard him speak about hiring, we at the time I had a mailing business. We had these, $300,000, $500,000 machines from Pitney Bowes, and he's like, what kind of analysis did you do before you purchased that? Right. We looked at our return on investment, the cost to own, maintenance costs, all of that. But when it came to hiring an employee that could cost the organization 300 to 500,000 if we got it wrong, we made that decision on a gut instinct, right? We didn't take time to identify who we need, what success looks like, and interview multiple candidates to see who's going to be the best fit.
So tactically then, if you are working with a business, an entrepreneur, a business owner who says, I'm ready to take the next step, Alec. I've identified the role that I need, a true A player in, but maybe their organization, because you have experience, you can look around and say, this is a lot of B players or C players, right? They're sort of making that leap into upgrading their team. What are some of the tactical things that you advise entrepreneurs to do to get ready for that hire and make sure that they are set up for success?
Yeah. So, the Dan Sullivan question I love, if we were talking 3 years today, what has to happen for you to be happy, both personally and professionally? And so, do you want a company with B players and C players? So it starts by hiring that first A player. It also starts by making sure that you really want a great culture. And great culture starts with a leader. I heard this years ago. I think John Maxwell said it. But you can teach what you know, but you replicate who you are. And so it starts with the entrepreneur and being passionate about the type of company you want, the culture you want. You live and breathe it. You hire and fire by it. If there's poor behavior in a company, if you're allowing it, you're actually encouraging that poor behavior. And so it starts there.
What do you say to the entrepreneur who's getting some level of comfort from their B and C team members, and they know they need to go to A? How do you go about thinking about that in regards to like the order of operations to start upgrading that talent pool when you're already getting something,
Mm-hmm. Great question. So you want to start with whoever the leader is, right? So you hire the hiring manager first. So if you're a company that runs on the OS and you need to upgrade your team, you want to start by hiring the integrator, the COO, the number 2 first, and allow him or her to be bought in terms of who they hire next. So that is success. You don't want to do the opposite where you're hiring the team members and then you bring in a leader, because they didn't have ownership of that, right? Sometimes it's a deeper question where entrepreneurs do have comfort in B and C players, and that's because they're the hero, they're the smartest person in the room, and they're almost afraid to have someone that is wiser and smarter than them, right? So it's a deep issue. There's a little bit of an ego. There's a little bit of humility that needs to be taken into consider. There's a purpose issue, right? And what I've found is that our clients, and myself included, that are able to let go and hire those A players, that they're able to spend more time in their unique ability, and they're happier, their company's happier, and they're able to make a bigger impact.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think that the sort of secret sauce in all of the hires that you've seen, all of the learnings that you've had, where you've seen it go well and where you've seen it go poorly, what are some of the things that are the hallmarks or characteristics of a right fit when you're hiring somebody? What are you looking for? How are you evaluating that talent?
So in terms of what our client wants, I want to make sure, if the client says, they don't necessarily have industry experience, that's music to my ears. And if they things like, I'm not in a hurry, I want the right person, that's more important to me than someone with a phenomenal resume. Those clients have the most success because they are willing to find someone that has the right skill set, the right aptitudes, the right ambition, character, all of that. And they minimize the importance of the resume. So, I would say the resume is a marketing brochure. It's written by somebody else. 100% of resumes have embellishments on them. Half of our resumes have outright lies on them. So we don't want to focus on the resume and experience. So the best clients are ones that say, I need the right person. So for example, we do a lot of integrator, second in command COO searches. And so we want to make sure that individual has really strong leadership ability, They have business and financial acumen. They have great attention to detail, a strong learning speed. They're organized, they're process oriented. So those are the things that we measure in the process. And we'll see individuals that have been in management their whole career. And when they go through our process, where we can see they've been in the wrong career their entire career, the wrong job their entire career. Only about 3% of the population has the right characteristics to be in that number 2 position. So from a leadership level, we do look to make sure they have a really strong cognitive horsepower, mental aptitudes, learning speed. And then from a personality standpoint, we want to make sure that the leaders are organized, they're process oriented, they value people, and they love to coach others. So that's from a leadership standpoint. We could talk through each position. So hopefully I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It leads me to another one though, which is when you're thinking about hiring, particularly a number 2, are you specifically filtering for some sort of entrepreneurial experience? So I get that the resume may not be the perfect roadmap in terms of like we don't necessarily need to see as much deep industry experience, but what about having that entrepreneurial organization experience? Because I've seen it go poorly where you hire somebody with a stellar resume who has a history of working in a large company or even a medium-sized company, and certain expectations of resources that they have available to them, certain expectations of staff support that they have available to them don't necessarily always translate to an entrepreneurial environment. And so if you're a business that, say, in that first $25 million of annual revenue, are you hiring somebody different or with a different background or with different markers than somebody, who would fit really well in a larger organization?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Ryan. You said it better than I could have. So they need to be, we usually say that they have to have small business experience. And what we're looking for is that at some point in their career, they worked for a small business, or maybe their spouse is a small business owner, or their parents, they grew up with parents who are small business owners. And you are spot on. If someone has a corporate background and that's all they knew their whole life, they do lack resourcefulness. They think that there is plenty of money and plenty of resources, plenty of people to do their job. And entrepreneurs, we want someone who's resourceful. And so if you don't have that small business background, it's unlikely. Not going to rule it out completely, but it's unlikely that they'll have that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that once that person arrives, into the organization, there's a tendency to make a very snap judgment about them, right? That even if they're an A player, you can't help but get the sense in the first few days of like, is this relationship going to go places or not? How do you coach your clients on what the right amount of time is before making those sort of conclusions, and how to sort of expectation set? Because if I'm hiring an A player for the first time and I feel like I'm engaging VisionSpark to really upgrade my team, boy, I'm expecting all of my hopes and dreams to be realized in the first 24 hours.
Yeah. So, number one is, hitting the ground running, which I hear a lot. I want that hire to hit the ground running. Well, in most cases, 99% of the time, that's a myth. Okay. So if they have a lot of experience and they're a slow learner, they're not going to hit the ground running. Or if they are lower in that experience for that particular industry, but they're a very quick learner, they'll come up to speed as quick as someone with that experience. So that's a myth. What you want to do is, if you think of this new hire as an investment, right? You're spending lots of time and money. So how can I maximize that investment? And one way to do it is to spend a lot of time. So you want to make sure the hiring manager and this new hire spend a lot of time in the first day, the first week, the first 2 weeks, right? Understanding each other's personality. So part of our process, we do a personality assessment, and we'll do a side-by-side, and we'll see, where there are potential gaps, what communication is important. We'll look at what's complementary. So that's super important. one of the things that I think entrepreneurs fail to do is to share how you're going to hold this individual accountable. What does success look like? How is performance going to be measured? So that's super critical. Visionaries, I'm one of them. We're a little sensitive. We don't like confrontation. We want to be liked. We like other people, and we oftentimes don't want to go there. And so it's so important on day one or day two, like, hey, this is how I'm going to hold you accountable, right? 90 days from now, this is going to make me really happy if you're doing A, B, and C. A year from now, we're sitting at dinner, the Dan Sullivan question, we're sitting at dinner, and I am just so grateful for all that you've done for me. This is what it looks like, right? So setting those expectations out. We also see a lot of visionaries, they have different tendencies. So some are completely hands off, and they're like, okay, there's the Penske file. I'm a Seinfeld fan. It's just like, here's my business, go run it. I'm going to go travel the world. And then they're shocked, they're upset when that new integrator they hired spends $20,000 at a conference they never spend at. So you have the hands-off entrepreneur. You also have like the micromanager entrepreneur that is very much wants, OCD, I should say, very much wants to make sure that every I is dotted, T crosses, no freedom to fail. So that's the poor behavior. And then you have like the helicopter parent entrepreneur, which they're kind of hands off. And then when there's a problem, they come in and they micromanage. So you want to make sure you have a good balance of all of that. And you set expectations, you meet often, you do trust building questions, you meet regularly, and it works out beautifully.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, just from an integrator standpoint for a small business, a lot of times they're trying to decide, does someone internal have what it takes to move up? I'm curious how you think about that, and what's a good framework to determine that.
Well, number one, as a company, we hope that is the case. So someone internally that has already bought in, they already have a comfort level. So we hope that happens. It's probably 20% of the time that candidate actually has the success traits to be that number two. And so we have a service we offer where those candidates are evaluated with our own IP as they would part of a search, and then we report back to the entrepreneur. Hey, we think Joanne would be a phenomenal number two. Here are one or two areas where she's going to need some additional training development. Or we're like, you know what, this is a really bad decision. You have a friend of mine reached out to me years ago. He had a person in his organization, and he's like, Alec, I want to promote her to my number two. And I said to him, let's say his name's John. I said, John, don't. You're going to lose your top business developer, and you're going to gain the worst manager you can hope for. And he ignored my advice, ignored the data. She was miserable in that new role and quit, went to a competitor, and was back in that business development role. So you want to make sure you really take time and evaluate if that person is the right person. It's easier to hire the devil you know than the devil you don't know. But oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, the outside candidate usually can provide a little bit more value.
How has hiring changed since 2020? So you think about, the ongoing debate about work from home versus in office. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who maybe have some of those OCD tendencies, the micromanage, the control tendencies that really would prefer to keep everybody in the office, or maybe there's a really good compelling reason that they have to have everybody in the office. But obviously the workforce is seemingly strongly preferring the work from home environment, right? For obvious reasons. How do you think about getting A players in today's environment? Because I have no doubt that it's easier than ever to stumble into C and B players because you're having them work from home and you don't have the same level of trust or relationship that you might otherwise if we were in just a default environment of being in the office, say like in 2019.
Yeah. So, if you do have a remote type work environment, you're going to get a lot more candidates interested in that. So that hasn't really changed. We are seeing some changes with companies wanting their employees back in the office. And so a lot of them are doing hybrid arrangements. That's what we do here at VisionSpark. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, they value that culture and communication. So they want people in the office. Companies that thrive then in the remote culture, they really are intentional about how can we have an awesome culture when we're all in different parts of the globe. So they're very intentional in that. Another area where things have changed is, you've heard of the old expression, hire slow, fire fast. So what I'm telling my clients is you have to hire slow faster. So you want to be as thorough, but you want to be quicker because the A players, they're in demand and someone else is going faster than you. So do the same due diligence, but speed up the process.
So it's so interesting that, you mentioned the pool of candidates would be larger. Does that mean in the way you look at it is if you want to hire exclusively A players, is it actually easier to have a completely remote sort of position? Or, I just think about in terms of being able to find the number of A players an organization might need. If you've got a bigger applicant pool, if they exclusively work remote because you can go search beyond, sort of the commute time, the radius from the office, is that a competitive advantage for the businesses that you're talking to?
Yeah, it's definitely a competitive advantage for sure. Some of the key positions, so if we're talking about that number two, like I just was actually talking to someone in my office earlier. They are a remote organization. And after talking, he wants that person to be within a couple-hour drive of him. And that's really wise because you're going to spend a lot of time with this person. And so, you need to have a huddle or a meeting or meet for lunch or, whether it's weekly or monthly, you want to make sure it's pretty convenient, or you can, hop on a quick plane and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So, but they, remote companies do have that competitive advantage, especially if they're intentional with their culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to me that, being able to draw on that wider talent pool, it also gives you the ability potentially to hire slow faster, as you said, right? Where you're able to find. Have you found that companies that are hiring A players but are working completely remote, are they at a disadvantage if they have really high growth ambitions? So asked another way, can you be a really high growth company and operate completely outside of an office setting? Or is there something special about being in an office together for really high pace of growth, fast moving, lots of change constantly? Is the communication that needs to happen to make all of that possible, is that doable in a fully remote setting?
I think it is. I've seen it happen in both instances. So I've seen high growth remote companies and in-person companies, right? And the healthy ones have a great culture, great leaders. Everyone's rowing in the same direction. They're all bought into the vision. So it's you have to be selective and making sure you hire someone with the right aptitudes, ambition.
I wanted to hear that story about the three businesses failing simultaneously. That sounds like a hoot. I'm sure it didn't feel like it at the time, but I bet you there's a great story there.
It was miserable. I was foolish and I thought that, I heard have three streams of income. So I had a failing business. It was a shrinking industry and we were getting a larger piece of a shrinking pie and it was declining. We saw the writing on the wall and I decided to start two other businesses simultaneously, both startups. One was a retail business, was a franchise, and the other was the mailing and printing company. And the mailing and printing company, we had one major client that was 90% of our profit and 80% of our revenue. And so the retail business, it was a franchise and we followed their model. And it took us 6 months to realize that they were completely wrong. And so I did a simple break-even analysis, totally revamped how we were operating because I was losing a lot of money every day. And so it was in like 1 week period where I got word that, or essentially I saw all the signs that all three businesses were going to fail very quickly. So the mailing company, our major client, said they were going to bring it in-house. The retail business, I thought it was going to be about 5 years before we were going to make up all the money that we are going to lose. And then I knew the other business was declining. And so I was devastated. There was time I was the lowest I've ever been, really relied on my faith, got some great mentors. We were able to save the client in the mailing business. So they were a client with us for the next 6 or 7 years, and that allowed us to diversify and grow. So that was a huge win. The retail business, we turned it around where it was making money, and we decided to sell it. We had 9 different buyers interested, and we ended up selling it to one, and they bought it. We did still lose money in that. It took us a while to pay everybody back. We'd gotten advice to declare bankruptcy, and I'm like, nope, we're not going to do that. Made sure everybody that we owed money to got their money back, and we paid them everybody back within the next a year or two or so. So yeah, I grew as an entrepreneur during that season.
How did you have the wherewithal to continue being an entrepreneur through all of that? I mean, that is a very, very tough journey.
I think it's it's grit. My dad, not an entrepreneur, but he instilled in me, he's from Scotland, never give up. And so I'm like, I'm not giving up. And so I decided that I would go all in on the mailing business, and that was great. And then, that story had an ending, which is why I started my company. But I parted ways with my business partner, and I was doing some consulting, helping companies with their cash flow. And I saw so many of them make bad hiring decisions. And I remembered some of the tools we had in the mailing business and some of the lessons I learned there. And so I started my company, VisionSpark, in 2012. January in 2012 was when we opened the doors. And just a passion to help entrepreneurs hire key people, right?
Yeah, I love that. What a great story of an opportunity in VisionSpark that came from what sounds like a really gruesome experience. I mean, that sounds like a really, really difficult test of who you were as a person. And, kudos to you for being able to exit without going the bankruptcy road and paying everybody what they were owed. I mean, that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a test of character for sure.
I think that's a great note to end on, and just some things that I gathered along the way from our conversation today. You teach what you know, but you reproduce who you are. I thought that was a great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Prioritize finding the right person over the perfect resume. I think that's a great mindset shift for companies that are looking to hire their A players. Share how you will hold your hire accountable, how success will be measured. Super, super important. And then hire slow, faster. I thought that was a great insider tip from being on the front lines of hiring in today's environment. You're super competitive. Alec, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We really enjoyed having you here today. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping our audience make better decisions about where they find their A players. If they want to engage you and learn more about VisionSpark, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our website is visionsparksearch.com, and there's a link there to reach out to us. I'm on LinkedIn. They're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Alec, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and appreciate your time today.
It was great being here. Thanks so much, Ryan.